Our chairman, Alex Bezanson, is not able to attend, as is Lindsay Wright, our vice chair. Hi. Alex has asked me to step in to chair the meeting for him on this day. Before we start, we just want to introduce the newest member of our committee. Do you want to take a moment just to introduce yourself and give us a little bit about your background?
Do I speak here?
You don't need to press anything,
No?
just need to.
Okay.
just need
Hi,
to
my
chat.
name is Nora Acevedo. I'm a resident here in Abington. Been living in Abington for 23 years. I have 2 children who went to school here in Abington. I know Mr. Schaefer. He knows my kids. And I'm also a teacher. I work at Brockton.
Okay.
Happy to be here.
Welcome to be here.
Thank you.
Do we have minutes, or are we going to skip over for the next time?
I distributed the minutes to Alex and Lindsay,
Okay.
and going forward, I'd include Tony on that.
Okay. People have the minutes from last meeting? No? Okay. We'll approve the meeting minutes at our next meeting. Next on the agenda was our meeting or discussion with some school officials to get a better understanding of conditions on the ground in terms of substance abuse in the school, the impacts it's having on students, and anything else we should know as we start to move forward. So last meeting, we said we're going to invite a number of school officials. They have showed up today. So I think, I don't know, best way of doing this, maybe just have a couple come up and trade off as needed. But I think what we're looking to do here is to get a good understanding of, I mean, we know that there's risk use reports that come out. I don't think the school department has done it in a couple of years, the big national one that they do.
We participated in that one this year. We haven't got the results yet.
Okay. So I think we're looking to get an understanding of kind of what you're seeing in the schools, how substance abuse is impacting our students, what the challenges are that you're facing, and help guide us maybe with some decisions that we have to make. So I don't know who the best person is to start. Yeah, just coming up here.
So I'm the least qualified of the people here from the school department to speak to this, because the people that are closest to it are Jonathan and Sarah, our principal and the nurse at the high school. From talking to them, I think that we're dealing with what all communities are dealing with, is a lot of kids that are using edibles and marijuana, and we know the effect that has on a young brain and brain development, and how that creates addictive habits in people. But I'm going to really let you take it from there.
Sure. Thank you. Hi, Jonathan Bourne, principal at the high school. And Sarah can, by all means, hop in if I missed something or another detail.
Hi,
Good?
how are you?
Good.
Didn't recognize you.
I know, it's the beard. I would say off the bat, the number one thing we encounter as the most common public health drug use nuisance is vaping. And that tends to be nicotine-based, but it is becoming more prevalent to be THC-based. And I would say this would be at least a daily occurrence for us at the school, despite a variety of efforts to combat that and prevent that. And then, I think that's just kind of hits on a lot of different levels, and the level of use is pretty profound, 5, 6, 7 times a day. Good communication with parents. Parents are very supportive. Like, we don't have a problem there, but I think just the availability, and I would be willing to bet the accessibility is beyond what we're thinking might be. Kids basically confide through Snapchat and Instagram. They can meet people at gas stations and get them. So if a parent did confiscate every vape a kid had on their purse, within 24 hours they could get their hands on some again. So.
Yep. We even got a vape detector in the nurses' bathrooms. We were finding that kids were coming in. It's a single bathroom. So we have a detector in there. We put a sign up because we're not looking to trick kids. We want them to know we care about them. We want to help them if they need to be vaping. And I would say we put a sign up, and I would say there's probably at least once a week kids get caught. I mean, an email comes to us right away. I alert administration. We have a conversation. Most of the time, well, they're fairly honest. I mean, they know we're not, it's a lot of times it's repeat offenders too, which is kind of the hardest part. They just can't make it through the day without using, and mostly that's nicotine. The THC they don't do in our office, at least that I've found.
So the 5, 6, 7 times a day is what? Just you run into an encounter with somebody who has used THC-based product of some sort, or?
I mean, I think it's, for the most part, what I would just say based on the years' experience I have here, it's a combination of, I think the closest thing is to what cigarette smoking in the bathroom may have been for people of my generation or around that generation. It's honestly a subculture, so it creates a sense of an identity. I'm not supposed to be doing this, but I'm doing this with other people who aren't supposed to be doing this. It's slightly rebellious. I think from a chemical intake standpoint, I've talked to the kids, what they derive from the actual vape is minimal at best and fleeting at best. But I think kind of the algebra in their head of why they keep doing it is part of to be there. I'm certain some kids get very dependent on kind of the nicotine piece of it. And so that, I think, is what draws them in more than anything, so.
I think the THC portion, we're seeing a lot of them do, unfortunately, prior to school too, because they'll come into my office in the first period, clearly impaired. It kind of puts us in like a little predicament, because if they left it in their car, we're not going out to their car to search. I mean, we don't like go to their car and search.
They come to your office because they choose to, or because a teacher says you need to go
Some
see?
of both, but sadly, they frequently they'll come on their own to get a snack, or if they're thirsty or tired. I mean, all of the symptoms, and they can't keep their eyes open, they're bloodshot. So we go through a checklist with them. We have a conversation with them. I call them out and say, you appear this way to me. Let's talk about it. And sometimes they'll admit it and they'll say, yeah, I did before school.
Okay.
And so in that aspect, it becomes more of, like a coaching or an educational piece versus a discipline piece. They didn't do it in school. So that doesn't mean we don't discuss it as a team and talk about how we can support the student. But again, most of these students it's not their first time either getting caught or coming in impaired, and us finding that.
So we're not talking, 25% of the school body, it's a small percentage, but they do it, it's often with that percentage, that smaller percentage that does it.
Yeah, I would think there's about, on like strictly in the building during the school day, it's probably a group of anywhere from 30 to 40 kids this is just, if you asked me who, I would have encounters with most of them, and they know who they are, and we know who they are too, and it's kind of like a sad cat and mouse game, so to speak. But the other piece to speak about with the vapes, especially the THC vapes, is they do not carry that very noticeable telltale odor. Mm-hmm. It's very hard to even determine whether someone has been vaping or not. And these devices can be rather small and hidden in a variety of places. Students don't always put them in their pocket. They're not always honest. So it's really a challenge in that sense to even have like a concrete example or conversation about what they're doing.
Has this been a growing issue since legalization has become a factor, or is this always or is it more the technology that's enabling this, or both?
I see more kids now than we ever did, with various complaints or issues or getting caught. I feel like I definitely see it more. I don't know. It's hard to, if I had to guess, I would say I think more kids are doing it. It's easy. It's easy to get. We have had some students get pretty sick from buying it from somebody not at a store that it had something in it other than just nicotine.
Yeah.
We've unfortunately had that when they banned the Juuls and all those. They were getting it on the black market and making it, and it was tough. They were getting really, really sick. So they get it, no matter whether it's legal or not. They're getting it.
I've been here for 3 years and it's been static, at least in these 3 years. It's basically the same incidence number in all 3 years.
I guess I would be curious, and I don't want to speak for the board, but at least personally, if it's one thing if it's static and it's black market and they're getting it from wherever. It's another thing if it's clearly someone is getting it at a store in town or nearby and then reselling it to kids. But it doesn't sound like that's quite what is, or they're getting it from their mom and dad's stash or whatever. It doesn't seem like that's quite what's happening.
It, in some cases, and to credit to our SROs, where we've had an indication that we keep seeing the same brand or type, they've made a point to go to the vendors in town to basically give a raised eyebrow and say, hey, we keep noticing this. And so if they notice too, I don't know if it's 18 is the legal age to buy a vape, do you know? I don't know off the top of my
I
head.
think it's 21.
I changed to 21
Yeah.
recently.
Okay.
But they all have older siblings, like a lot of them have older siblings. And so that's all it takes is, you know,
Yeah.
they'll go, it's just like, you know, when kids used to underage buy alcohol, it's they're getting, you know, somebody will go in and buy 2 or 3 vapes and everything's on Snapchat. Everybody knows everything on Snapchat. They know who's in the bathroom at what time, they know who's there, who has what vapes, they know.
They do record themselves doing it too.
They do.
So it's not exactly
They
like,
do.
you know,
It's a secret, yeah.
top level criminal behavior here. It's like, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they'll, you know,
But we're not seeing a spike in terms of number of people doing it, occurrences, it's,
You know, I think more what, I don't know if.
I'm not
it's
trying to
sp-
underplay it, but I'm
No,
just
no, no,
trying to get a
fine,
sense
yeah. I guess it's just the frequency of the kid per day, like this has transcended, like, I'm gonna try this.
okay.
You know, and it becomes like a thing I do at school, and that's the problem that we're combating, so.
I think more are getting caught, so it's hard to know, like, are we just getting better at knowing, like, where they're gonna be at what time, or putting things in place, like staff randomly walking into the bathrooms to see, you know, is there congregating and they'll happen to catch kids vaping? Or is it an increase? Personally, I think it's probably a combination of both. I definitely know of kids that in 2 years ago, would I have thought they ever would have vaped? I never would have thought they vaped, and now I know they do. Just knowing from outside of, you know, in the community. So I think it's both.
Okay.
What are the consequences for getting caught? And secondly of all, do you all notify parents?
Yeah, I mean, we notify the parents almost on just about anything. So even if we hear, you know, kids talk about a weekend and some things, we notify parents and say, hey, for what it's worth, this is what we heard, you know what we know, just so there's no surprises. But anytime we find a student either with a vape or close to, we give parents a call. Consequences range from, you know, we try not to, I think, to Ms. LaPointe's point, not alienate kids by making them so, you know, odious that kids, you know, really, there's an incentive to tell the truth and kind of maintain a connection. So those consequences can range from detentions, longer detentions on half days, which don't sound like as bad as the suspension, but when the rest of the building leaves at 10:43 and you're there till 2, you remember that one. Sometimes in-school suspensions, out-of-school suspensions if needed. We try to avoid that because that sends kind of the opposite message. We also feather in an education piece, and we actually try to pull these kids in closer to get them know better, to do some education because they don't know about the consequences of this. And we talked to them. I said, you guys are all guinea pigs. 10 years from now, 15 years from now, there's going to be a medical study, right? I think we all know this is coming. There's going to be this emerging group of 30 to 40-year-olds that have these chronic health issues, and they'll be like, yeah, I vaped when I was a teenager. We try to share those things with them. So parent involvement's been great. You know, the parents are honestly kind of as flummoxed as we are, because like I said, they'll go through, clean the kid's room out, backpack, and through friends, through other people, they can get their hands back on it, so.
I would love to see more education for the kids that do get caught. I would love to see us be able to develop a, you know, a more robust education. But, you know, there is a definite shortage of access to getting them help sometimes, whether the parents aren't as involved as we'd like. So that's when, you know, administration really works very closely with the family to try to get them, the parents have to get them to, you know, to a counselor or to their pediatrician. We meet a lot of resistance with pediatricians. We're struggling with them as well. From a nursing perspective, you know, I just had a parent tell me they referred, the mom called and said, I think my kid's vaping, like what resources are out there, and they told her to bring this student to a Narcotics Anonymous meeting. So to her, that was like, you know, that's not helpful. She was concerned about her vaping nicotine, so she was like, well, you know, if it got to that point, of course, or if she found her doing other drugs, that's a different story, but she was just kind of looking for more resources, so that's something I think.
Are you still seeing marijuana as another step down the gateway towards some hotter issues? Or do you see it more just stopping with that?
Yeah, I would hate to, honestly, just from my purview, and I don't mean to sound like I have blinders and don't know that it can't lead to other things. There are some students, single-digit students, that we know of that are pretty heavily involved in things beyond marijuana, that we are in direct and close partnership with them and their parents in outside treatment. I think the availability of it has made it more common. So I think it may have spread, but I believe it mostly stops there, but I don't for a second think that there aren't kids who go further. Please.
Well, once they start using, you know, marijuana, they're more likely to develop a problem later on. And no heroin addict hasn't, or
Right.
any addict
Yeah.
hasn't used marijuana.
And we may not see that, like, we may not
Right, it
see
may-
that directly in the high.
There's a high school,
I mean,
but it'll
right,
lead
exactly.
to-
So it's not to mean it doesn't happen, I think just we don't capture that moment in time.
Right.
But if
Yet-
it starts in high school.
Yes,
Yeah.
for sure.
I would actually say that's probably the most critical piece is when they leave us. Because even though these kids are doing these things, they stay young, believe it or not, in a lot of ways with us. But once they leave, they then lose that day-to-day connection. And then I think there is some like, well, what do I do with my time
Right.
now? And so,
Like, right now, they know we are there, so like, they'll come to us and we, you know, recently had a student that was pretty honest and was like, I took an edible, I feel like crap, and I shouldn't have, I made a mistake, but, you know, that's gone, to Mr. Bourne's point, that's gone when they leave our school. Like, now they have people they can come to, and we've made it kind of an environment that, you know, that they're better off with honesty, to be honest, and Mr. Bourne's really good about saying, listen, like, there might be consequences to your actions, but you being honest and upfront will further assist that relationship going forward, instead of, you know, us just, you know, knowing that you weren't truthful, and then we can't trust you, right? So we try really hard to maintain that. I feel like most of them do know they can trust us and be honest. Some of them won't, even when they're holding it in their hand, they'll say, no, I didn't do it. I mean, they're kids. But there are a decent number that are pretty honest and upfront with us or will come to us with concerns.
So for the kids that are escalating beyond marijuana, what resources are they being provided as far as?
it's a great question. We're very fortunate to have a very helpful partnership with Independence Academy in Brockton. Their principal is in regular communication with us. So we use them in a lot of ways for diversion meetings, so to speak. So if we have a student that we've caught vaping on a second offense, we will just have them meet with the principal of Independence Academy. Just so you know, this is a recovery institution that's available as a resource to you free of charge if you want it. Not every kid takes advantage of that, but it's just more, again, like a public health piece for us to let them know if you are struggling, because again, we've caught you twice in this year, that's 2 more times than we would hope a teenager to have. So in addition, so kids can do a 10-day piece over there just to spend a little time working with them.
What's this place called again?
Independence Academy in Brockton. You're welcome.
Independence.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. And then they can do longer quarterly pieces, or a student can fully enroll there for their high school diploma if they have more profound issues. And it is, as it sounds, a recovery style program. So there's education.
It's part of the collaborative. It's one of their programs.
Do they have busing for them to go to Brockton, or the parents have to bring them?
I think for the short term, we don't do transportation, but if a student stays past the 10 days, I believe, and I may be wrong, but I believe we are responsible for their transportation. It's honestly case by case. I don't know if, yeah. It has been, when it's happened, it's been an open partnership piece where parent and really the student has to buy in and say, this is what I want.
And
Yeah,
the
this-
parent
yeah.
drives them there to Brockton? Even if it's for the first 10 days, like you
It's been a
said?
very successful program,
Yeah.
because they
They provide academics away from high schools. They stay caught up with their work in a clean environment with counseling and resources and tools to help them.
They won't take the student. Like, if the student says, I don't want to be here, I don't want anything to do with this, they're like, all right, let us go back to your Abington High School, let us know when you're ready, and we'll be here. So it's, no students that are there are forced to be there. It's not a punishment. It's an alternative to help them. I mean, I know we have one student there that's been there for, we thought would be there for a short term. She's been there for a little bit, and I'm so happy for her, because this is, she was on a bad path, so this is wonderful for her.
But my question was, that parents have to drop them off and pick them up, or?
Yes, and I gotta be
okay.
honest with you, that has not, yes, and it hasn't been an impediment
Okay.
in any of the cases.
It hasn't been?
It
okay.
hasn't come up that any parent has said, I can't transport them.
Okay.
Or they drive themselves too.
Mhm.
Yeah,
They're
Depending on
older?
the age, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
okay, thank you.
Welcome.
With the growing number of ELL students in the district, is there any need for any different approaches, strategies, resources for that population?
We could always use people who are bilingual in Portuguese and English, just as a way of better communication to kids and families. Any kid is likely to experiment with things, whether they're ELL or not, so it doesn't necessarily focus on one population or the other. So anyone, again, we try to have a mind to where we have a resource like this in Independence, that we don't have a Portuguese-speaking version of that. So anyone, just any increased access with language would be a huge help.
I feel like there's definitely I can't communicate, I'm communicating with them through like Google Translate or a translating app, so for sure, there's a gap in my ability to really educate them at length that's productive. It's hard to go back and forth on a conversation with you like typing, and they get frustrated. So that from my perspective, from the nursing perspective, education-wise, I definitely do not do as much education with the Yale population.
I do know it's an equal concern of their parents with sending kids to the high school, and we'll hear this from a lot of our rising ninth grade parents, that's a concern. They hear about that, and it's a fair concern, and as Peter said, with any high school,
Yep.
but I know that's a concern for them as well. So there may be an opportunity for some parent education there.
I have another question. Have you seen any increase? I know that you're at the high school, but how about elementary and middle school? Because I've heard in the news, kids are taking edibles like they're candy, and they're getting sick. Have you heard about that happening in Abington?
Yeah, so I actually had a conversation with the principal of the middle school today in preparation for this meeting, just to kind of say, like, what are you guys seeing? And I talk to the nurse over there pretty frequently. Mostly nicotine right now, I will say, in school, mostly nicotine. There have been a couple cases of edibles. I think they're not as easily accessible at the younger, I don't want to say they're not accessible, because they also have older siblings, but a lot of them they're not as social media savvy. You get to 7th and 8th grade for sure. 5th and 6th graders, some of them have phones, some of them have social media, some don't. Not to say on the bus, somebody can't, say, hey, use somebody else's phone, but I definitely, the biggest issue we have is the social media, the ability for them to communicate in real time with people constantly through social media apps. Middle school, they did say they see some THC, but they have found that by they catch a kid vaping nicotine, and when they searched the bag, they found the THC vape, which has happened to us too. Like they're a lot more apt to vape the nicotine in school than the THC. They just,
Oh, I see.
I don't know if they think they're gonna get in more trouble or something, I don't know. But so they have had some edibles, they've had, I think, one alcohol use, but for the most part, nicotine is their biggest concern,
Wow, thank you.
as of right now.
Have there been any, one area I think we're looking to focus on is with Narcan training and supply as well. How is that an issue in terms of, is it needed? I mean, are we seeing it with using kids where there's populations in the high school that need to have this training for friends, colleagues, whatever?
We have a first aid CPR class, definitely, that I think, we wouldn't be shy about having any life-saving training for those groups of kids. I just contrast to, and I know we worked at Brockton at the same time I was in Brockton in the early 2000s, and I would have said yes, like immediately. I feel like that's not as pressing right now, but that I hate to sound like it's not happening. In my 3 years, that's not something we've encountered from kids, maybe recent graduates. So I think, again, it's something shifts after they leave. So it wouldn't hurt for those folks to have access to
Right.
that training.
So there's no Narcan, the nursing staff does not have Narcan at this time. The SROs do. I do know when fire came they did something in that CPR first aid class, and they did Narcan training in the class. But nurses do not have Narcan, just the SROs. So if there was ever an incident, we would have to call an SRO, which is concerning. I mean, if I'm being honest, is concerning to me because time is of the essence.
It's very important to have.
As far as training for students and staff, I never would say that they wouldn't need it because to the point of these things progress, and I think they're gonna experience things and be around people outside of the high school that you never know when they could save somebody's life. Just like having an AED, right? Like, why would we not have it to save someone's life and hope we never use it or never need
Yeah,
it?
there's no reason the nurses can't have.
Yeah, we just never did. I don't know.
Either, sorry. Would that be like a school, because I talked to Lindsay quickly about it, would that have to go before a school committee?
I don't think so. Maybe I'm wrong, I don't know, it's a supply that you have in the nurse's office,
Yeah.
like an EpiPen.
So we would just have to get a standing order from the school physician, who's wonderful.
We would
She's
include that
wonderful.
on the list of things. to
Correct.
administer.
Yeah, so it would just be a standing order.
Okay.
Yep.
Because I've had parents come up to me, like when we did Narcan training at the
Mhm.
football game, they said, just in case, I have 3 teenagers. I
Yep.
want this just in case.
Well, and you don't know who's coming to your house. Like,
Right.
they have friends over, so like you would, you never know. You just never know. So I would always advocate for education, but I don't have an immediate concern right this second in our schools. But again, it just takes one. You just never know.
So you're
Can I
not
say
seeing-
something
go ahead.
about Narcan? So I'm a member of Learn to Cope, and I do trainings, until the pandemic started. But I was doing training for using Narcan, so any parent who has a child who is using drugs, especially opioids, they can go to Learn to Cope. There's many chapters. There's one in Quincy, there's in Brockton. They're in the area, and you can get Narcan training, and also you can get Narcan to take home. And it expires, I don't know if it's every year, every 2 years, but you can get a new one, you just turn it in, get a new one, and so on and so forth. So anybody who needs that, please reach out to Learn to Cope, you can get free Narcan.
Thank you. That's good for us to be able to communicate to the community, just for the parents that do want to have it.
Definitely, yes.
Any other questions for our school friends? All right. Thank you so much for coming in. This is helpful and informative, and I'm sure we'll be in discussion, having longer chats very soon.
Very good.
About all this.
All right.
So if there's anything else you think it's important for us to know moving forward, please follow up with us. And I think we'll do the same if we have any questions we think about later on.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd add is parents are thirsty and very willing partners with us in solving this. They're not happy. They're not sending kids to school and be like, geez, Mr. Bourne, why are you being such a mean guy? They're equally frustrated and flummoxed by this. So I think any way to pull parents in to create that fabric, that network, to know we're all pushing in the same direction, working together here would be well received.
Okay.
I think we're also struggling with like the mental health component of a lot of these kids that are a lot of our repeat offenders also have correlating mental health issues. And that's not to say people with substance abuse also have a mental health diagnosis, but we are seeing a lot of kids that have just a lot going on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you seen any kids using like medicine bottles like ibuprofen to put edibles in or something else along those lines? Because I know when I was in high school, that's what they were doing.
Yeah, I think more pills, like, we have caught a couple with like, you know, their Adderall or prescribed medication that they shouldn't have on them. I haven't found anybody, but I will say, prescription medications, more so, I mean, if, we've had a handful of kids that are saying they're taking something at home, which is why I was psyched to see the, you know, the mid-return.
So, and we know that in terms of brain development, before the age of 21, those receptors are just developing, you know, these pathways. And if kids are using recreational drugs, they're just, while their brain is developing, it's not the only pathway to addiction, but it's a pathway to addiction.
Well, the THC is completely different as well. Like, it's not what was in the 90s. It's so much more potent. I mean, I feel like enough people don't know that.
That's a good
I
point.
need that.
No, so that's a great point that you say that, because we've had a handful of our students that have used THC in school, and it was like literally their first time. And they drop. It's like a pretty significant, they just had no idea.
Right.
You know, they pictured like, you know, smoking marijuana, and, you know, you can have way more than just taking one
It's
or
much
two.
more harmful now.
Yeah, so
than
we do see
what
them.
there is in the dispensaries.
That's a great point, thank you for bringing that up, because we are seeing kids get pretty sick from that, when they do it in school.
Do you guys receive like incidents from other school, like your colleagues in other school departments, so like a principal from Rockland, if they come into contact with something a little more serious, do they reach out to you as a heads up and say, hey, this is?
About their own students?
Not specifically, but like, hey, somebody was vaping and they, maybe it was laced with something more serious, like, would you find out about that?
It depends, I mean, it
Just
depends.
as like a courtesy type
Yeah,
thing?
we do actually have a good communication with Rockland in particular, just because like, our kids know each other and go to each other's events. So they do communicate with us through the SROs or through me directly to say, hey, this happened at a basketball game, heads up. And again, we're of a size and of a commitment. We share all of that with the parents and say, for what it's worth. I got a call from a Chick-fil-A in Hanover on a half day that kids wearing Abington stuff were up to shit, like they were messing up the place. We call the parents, say, hey, for what it's worth, don't know, right? Wasn't there. Just so you know what we know. So whenever we get that, we almost always share that with parents, so.
Nursing wise, I get most of my information, I mean, obviously, if Mr. Bourne finds out something, he lets us know, hey, keep an eye out, but the kids are pretty open. You build a relationship with them, and they're pretty open to say, oh my God, did you hear about what happened at the party in Cohasset? Or I'm like, oh no, what happened? And, they'll usually spill it, and then I'll be like, hey, Mr. Bourne, just an FYI. I give a lot of FYIs. I feel like but I get most of my information from
Students.
not the nurse from the other school, but the students, or from administration.
To go a little bit off subject, what are you seeing regarding teen drinking? Up, down, same?
I honestly think it's probably at a place where the kids are way less visible about it. I don't think it's changed up or down. I just know they are not putting it in our face, like it may have been even a decade or two ago.
And I don't think they're driving. So I think they have access, they get rides from people, or I won't say they're not driving. I think it's a lot less drinking and driving than like when I was in high school. And I think that it's like they can Uber, they can, or parents are a lot more open, I think, too, to say, listen, if you're drinking, call me, I will come get you. And I think kids do, get rides more often. I worry more about them doing THC and stuff and driving than drinking and driving. I do think they're drinking, for sure. I mean, again, I go by what they're telling me, so. I have not seen it in school.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
I have to leave.
Sorry. Can someone pick up the notes, minutes? Okay.
Awesome.
Any other thoughts from anybody else in attendance about this topic before we move on? If not, we'll start taking a look at our application for funds, which is in the packet handed to you. There's two sets in here, one just the questions and one how it looks, or how's it split up?
I'm not sure, I didn't make them. Lindsay made them.
Okay.
I'm just sitting in for her.
Okay.
I know the highlighted section was her concerns of what we want for titles, and she wrote some notes in. Can I see the list of questions I gave you earlier? No. No, it's okay.
So I have a list of questions here that Lindsay put together.
Those were already
Oh.
addressed. You
Yep.
only need the bottom one now.
Okay, and she had an idea for a mission statement. Okay. Come back to that in a moment. Regarding the application itself, does anybody have any thoughts, questions, statements? The one note that I would have is I'd like to see a little bit more about, I guess, how do they measure success? What's the goal that they're looking for? How do we know if it was spent right, and how do they know if they achieved what they tried to do, and kind of what's the metric to be, I guess, businessy about it? You know, we have a lot of questions about their contact info, but not a lot about in terms of, all right, what are you gonna be, how do we know if you're gonna use our money appropriately? So I guess my main thing was just to add a question saying, please explain how you will measure success, whether it's a metric or performance or something.
Is that something that can actually go in the application though? Would that be part of the follow-up process, or
I think it's just-
something we, yeah?
I think it's just a goal to know. It's
Yeah.
like our goal is
Yeah.
to educate 50 people in East Narcan, or our goal is
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
provide,
like an earmark?
services
gotcha.
for 12 people,
Yeah.
or I don't
Yeah.
know.
It'd be nice to have that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If they say their goal is
Yeah.
12 people and they come back and they've done 3, well, okay, now we need to know why.
And they reapply.
Anything else, or do people feel comfortable moving on with this?
I have a question.
Sure.
My question is about, so this application is for people who are going to be doing something, I'm assuming, like an organization or a private individual, like it says here, prevention, harm reduction, treatment and recovery. But I was thinking, I did send an email to, I forgot who I sent it to, but about this, about the person who sent this survey, our application. Is there space for grandparents raising the children of their children? Though some of them have died, the parents have them, or the court has appointed the grandparent as a guardian now of this child on people who are about to retire now, they have to be raising a new child or children. Is there something for them? Where do these people go when this is happening? So
Yep.
I don't see anything here.
And they're spending a lot of money fighting, trying to get the children. The grandparents are fighting to get the children from these homes. That's.
Some of them are,
Yeah.
definitely, and some of them are fighting to get them, and others, the court just says, you're taking care of this kid now.
Yeah.
I know people, because I go around to Cove, I know people who, a grandparent who she went to see her daughter, she had a baby, and her daughter was a user. And then they called her at home, your daughter left, she hasn't come back, you need to take the child. So she was raising the child. Unfortunately, this lady had cancer, and she passed away, so now the child is with other people, so.
So there's some specific guidelines of what we can use the settlement funds for. And did you get that in a packet, in one of your emails? Introductory
I got
emails?
this in the
Okay.
email, but I didn't get any guidelines. I got this, the same thing, and then questions about what do you think about this,
Yep.
and so on and so forth.
So there's definitely a packet with kind of, this is the sort of things money can be used for, and it's
Well, I
very
got
lengthy
this.
and detailed.
Is this what you're talking about? It's not it, this is a
It's
summary of
else.
something.
It's
Oh,
pretty
okay.
detailed. It falls into four kind of buckets: prevention, harm reduction, treatment, and recovery.
Uh-huh.
And then it's all sorts of different things that fall under those four buckets. I don't remember if, legal assistance for, those issues come under that. And we're not putting any handcuffs on what people can do as long as it kind of meets these general standards.
Okay.
I'll forward her those right now.
I
Okay.
believe like half of the
can have
actual
this.
allocation of the
Oh, put my
grand
email?
total
Figure you
is
know right there.
actually for, like, set aside for privately, do you know, it's like for the
Thank you
private
so much. I appreciate
consumption to take care, I think so, from what I read about it, but I think, and this would be more of a programming bridge, that type of thing, but I think so, yeah.
Well, there's definitely, sorry, there's.
Could you just come up to talk? I know, because I know what you say is going to be valuable, so I want to hear everybody hear it.
I was just gonna say, there definitely is, I've sat on like a ton of meetings for this, there is supporting families, with, when you say supporting people in recovery, I think that it would include people, grandparents raising kids or whatever. So I feel like no matter what, there's always, you could interpret it in a certain way. But I do know that supporting families with someone that's struggling with substance use is definitely in there, so I feel like,
But supporting the grandparents who are raising the child, but not necessarily their own child who's using
well,
drugs.
I don't think it's gonna specifically say grandparents,
Uh-huh.
but families,
Okay.
right? So that grandparents and the
So a grandparent
children.
can use this form, or no?
Say-
Yes.
Because this has a goal, and I wouldn't know what, I was just thinking about the funds allocated.
Private citizen, private group, or town department. So anybody could.
So it could be like learn to cope, right?
Can you introduce yourself, please?
Sorry, Melissa Cook, Abington Copes.
Thank you.
I do have another question while I'm up here. So is this application that's gonna be standard, everybody's gonna, right? So Abington Copes isn't getting a specific application, right?
No.
Okay, because I feel like last meeting, some things were asked of me. I was told I need to have certain things, which I thought were unfair. So if the application is the way it is, then I feel.
What is,
Okay.
can you ask what the concern was?
Well, somebody that is not here that told me they wanted me, I needed speakers because we support people with existing substance use as well as educate the kids. So I've brought in a speaker and we're bringing in another speaker, and they wanted a list of like, for the next year, who I would be bringing in for speakers, and that's not even something I could do.
Yeah.
Because that has to be talked over with Peter and everything, so I felt that was a little,
Yeah, so I think the way we'd approach going forward is not so much like the CPA model, which is you have a list that is voted at town meeting and then that's it. There's no other applications that can be considered the rest of the year. And a little bit more flexible so that if there's a situation that pops up, we can take a look at it and say yay, nay.
right, like I would say, I'd like to bring in 2 speakers, give you a ballpark of
Right.
what they cost, but I can't name the speakers, and that's what
Right.
I was asked to do, and it's like, and then I was also asked to get together a 12-month action work plan, and I feel that's a little unreasonable
Yeah.
as well.
So, I mean, the thing we have to take in consideration is that we will not be able to fund every request.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Or fund every request at the amount requested. So, we'll welcome, I think, again, I don't want to speak for the entire board, but we welcome all requests, but not everything can be honored necessarily.
Oh, yeah. Well, like I said last meeting, everything I would ask for is coming from, like, right here, so. I just wanted to make sure. I felt like, well, am I getting like a different application from everybody? So,
Nope, we'd have to give the same one to everyone.
I thought so, but I was just like, I felt it was being a little unfair, the things I was asking, like, ask for at last meeting, so.
The other question, I think, I can't remember where I just saw it, was how much of the application is public? And I don't know the answer to that.
Let me just, I don't know if it says in
I mean, the assessors can take things into executive session to consider for financial privacy reasons, and I know all the application grants that you get from the senior center, that isn't all public, and all the details you get aren't public. I don't know if this is different, because we're now a public meeting, public committee with public meetings. I don't know if we have to go into executive session to discuss if it involves sensitive information.
Great question.
So,
That's a really good
wouldn't
question,
you
I don't
count
know.
just the paper copy as what you'd hand out?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we're gonna be getting information that's sensitive. So,
Town council would be the answer.
yeah,
Yeah, we'll have to dive back into that.
so, we're gonna have to do that as a follow-up, is to say, all right, what are the rules for public consideration? You know, I certainly understand the argument that you want this to be as transparent as possible, but I don't think that's always possible. You certainly can't do all your business in public, and you can't.
Makes sense.
Yeah,
But they have mass state statute,
right,
and I don't think this does.
correct, correct. Yeah. So, do people want to say yes, and we'll start to put this out in public? Do you want more time to mull it over and
I think
look at it again
everyone,
in 2 weeks?
should everyone be together when we do that?
Okay, so we'll hold off on 2 weeks.
I just think everyone should. Right,
Yep,
yeah.
then we'll do that. So if you have any other comments or thoughts, you can pass them along.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else on this topic? All right. Discussion about wording for a mission statement. Lindsay had passed along something, I'll read it. The Abington Opioid Allocation Fund Committee's mission is to provide advice, recommendations, and to identify spending priorities as related to opioid use disorder prevention, harm reduction, treatment, and recovery strategies for the purpose of providing funds from the opioid settlement fund in a fair and equitable manner. I guess this goes back to the whole origin of this board, is that we're not technically allocating the money, that it's the town manager that is. This is so what we do here is just recommendations on spending. The editor in me says the purpose of distributing instead of providing funds, but, or allocating.
Like allocating?
Would you mind emailing that out once you're done
Yeah.
chopping it, Rick? Thank you.
Yep.
Can you CC me on it for website purpose? Thank you.
Will do. And again, we'll take a look at it in 2 weeks
Wow.
at our next meeting and try to get that finalized. Kind of going back and forth on this for a little bit. All right, discussion of wording for special town meeting warrant item. Can't remember what this is quite about. Is this,
That had to do with the 4 categories and
Yeah.
asking for if we can use the 4 categories as kind of a bridge so that we can have a broader palette to disperse or the funds. It would give us a little bit of a bigger bridge.
okay. So again, the idea is that, I believe under state law, this is being viewed more as a grant than anything else, which means that it doesn't require town meeting appropriation.
That's correct. If it's a grant,
Yeah, I think we're trying to double check that to make sure, because then that way we don't have to, like we do with the CPA, have a detailed list of every dollar that's going to be spent in the coming year, but rather it's more of a general authorization to spend out of the fund as needed. I think we have to establish a fund too. That'll be the second part, is we have to, this is what Andrew said last year, is right now, the money is going into free cash. We need to establish a revolving fund or a trust fund for future disbursements, and then we spend out of that trust fund, I think is what the discussion was.
Sorry to interrupt. Just a prize for you,
Oh,
Belinda.
thank you. My other job. So, again, I think we need to follow up with town council just to find out what other towns are gonna be doing and have that prepared. I mean, we're still 4 months out from a special town meeting, so we're not rushing, but I don't know if Alex maybe had some other detail to clarify, but we'll keep that on the agenda for 2 weeks as well. All right. Anything else to be heard? Good? All right, so, do we have a formal meeting on the calendar for May?
Last week.
2 weeks from now is May 8th. Is there an issue for May 8th at 3 PM for people? All right. And Tony, is that something you can coordinate with Brian just to make sure we get an agenda and everything forwarded to this, for that date?
I guess, yeah.
Awesome. All right, anything else?
Can I ask a question about future meetings?
Sure.
Sorry, I'm asking a lot of questions. So, do we meet in the summer as well? Because I know some people go on vacation and so on, so I was wondering if it's gonna be the second and fourth Monday, even during the summer month?
I think the goal is, once we get up and going, we'll be meeting more once a month versus
Okay.
every 2 weeks. I think we're just, while we're pulling all of it together,
Mhm.
we have to meet a little bit more frequently. But I think starting over the summer, it'll be more like once a month.
Okay. We can discuss it more maybe in May?
May 8th?
Because I'm a member of a board for the MTA as well,
Mhm.
and they're doing the yearly convention in Florida this year, so I'm gonna be there for about a week and a half,
Okay,
or 2 weeks, I think, and so it's gonna be falling in one of these
okay.
Mondays.
We'll do our best to get you all the information and
Mhm.
figure out how we can get your input, and I don't think we're making any decisions in the month of May. I think it's more, get the applications out, we'll start making decisions over the summer.
Okay.
Ways to go.
Yeah.
All right, thank
All
you.
right. I will entertain a moment to adjourn.
Move
Motion
to adjourn.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rick.
Appreciate it.